What's happening, guys? So today we're going to be doing an introduction into the soil food web. Um, I talk a lot about nutrients, but it's really hard to fully adapt and understand why I use the nutrients I do in what stages unless you understand how soil works. Soil is a living organism. If it's not, it's dirt. That's the difference between dirt and soil. Uh, so soil is going to have all those microorganisms, and this is not like a limited design. There are millions upon trillions of things. It's a world within a world within a world. Um, for example, everyone has heard of nematodes, um, composting worms. Those are all basic worm types at different levels. Nematodes tend to be a little bit, I feel, a little bit more microscopic compared to a standard composting worm. And of course, there's bacteria that are trillions times smaller than that, to where when you look under a microscope, they just look like little bitty dots. Um, there's fungal, and then there's all kinds of different pests and prey within those ranges. Um, so I'm going to be using a Wikipedia um, soil food web picture as a guide for you guys, just to kind of help you go through this. I give you a little bit of it's not showing. Give me 1 second. See if we can turn that down. You can pretty much look up any soil food web design. There we go. Looking a lot better. That's pretty much what it's going to look like. Now, obviously, if you're going to be starting anything, the first rule of growing is to grow something. Why? Because that's what's going to begin that cycle. All of that soil food web and soil in general has to have something growing. Even when we age our soil here, we put nitrogen fixers in there. We cut them back and we place them on as a mulch, let them regrow and seed. Allowing that to happen creates a very unique and diverse microbial and soil life, even when we're not intending to use anything out of it. And it doesn't end up lacking in nutrients. So just starting out, we're going to start with inorganic, and then we'll move towards our organic. Inorganic fertilizer actually is salt-based and tends to kill off the soil, microbials, the little soil food web that we're working to gain. And of course, there's pesticides, insecticides, bird repellents. There's all kinds of different things that we humans use to make sure that our crops, don't get messed with. In a lot of cases, 1 second, guys. In a lot of cases, when a farmer uses insecticides, if the insects do, it's not going to repel them. So if the insects do show up, it tends to kill them. Or if it doesn't kill them, maybe harms them, and a bird comes and eats that insect, now all of that insecticide that got touched or eaten or whatever is damaging our ecosystem. Inorganic, and before y'all think I'm just hating on inorganic fertilizer has its place. It's very great. It's very easy to use. It does have its place in society. But I personally believe, and science has kind of proven it a little bit, so we know for a fact organic is the best way to go. But sometimes our plants need a little more up for what our needs are. In something like that, adding inorganic to your organic recipe or fertilizer, it's beneficial. You don't have to put in an insane amount. Think of it like using Epsom salts. Now, even though Epsom salt is a salt, for those of you that don't know, clay actually has a something of like a magnetic charge to it. So it actually tends to draw salts and help keep them. So if you have a sandy, very loamy soil, it's probably not going to retain as much salts. So you may be able to or have to add more salts. That's where the Epsom salt fertilizer comes in. if you've ever applied Epsom salt fertilizer, you know you don't apply much. Just a little bit here, a little bit there, 1 or 2 times a season. It's not something you need an insane amount of. Just having it present, having those ions present, is beneficial. Now, if if you're using Miracle Grow, I use Miracle Grow. It's going to be basically salt based. It's the same concept. A little bit here, a little bit there. It's not going to hurt anybody. But if you start using it in heavy loads, it will start to, kill off the microbials. And there's a number of reasons it does that. So first of all, outside of just the outside, overall salt content, that will kill off a lot of microbials, fungals, and bacterial stuff like that. So then that leaves certain relationships with the plant. So you killed off, maybe some of the extra stuff that's not as necessarily, needing to keep this plant alive. It just keeps the health and the vigor up. And so now, take a symbiotic relationship with mycorrhizal fungi. Sorry, I'm stuttering, guys. These are hard words for me a little bit. The mycorrhizal fungi actually help feed the plant. So the plants generally release sugars through their roots and different chemical compounds. And whenever they release that, different symbiotic relationships return, with other types of nutrients. So when you're feeding, you're not actually feeding your plant. You're actually feeding the soil. So adopting this new technique of thinking can help benefit you. There is such a thing as foliar spray. So technically, can you feed your plant directly? Yes, you can. But that's, we'll cover that a little bit later, probably in another video. So anywho, it really, it's up to you to make sure the balance is there. And there are ways you can actually take a little bit of soil in a test tube and add water and shake it and put it under a microscope. I can't remember the lady's name, but she was like a pioneer for soil, the soil food web. And I think her name was Elaine. Dr. Elaine. She actually has a soil food web school. She is like a partial pioneer for this kind of thing. I don't know if she pioneered the whole thing. I don't know all the details, but you're gonna hear about her. She mostly started pushing for bacterial. So back to what I was originally saying. You have your grass or plant. Now it's growing. Now, if you use inorganic fertilizer, again, it's going to kill everything, and then you're going to be reliant on the next round of fertilizer because there's nothing to feed this plant, as we had already proven. So, you take the plants, just let it grow. All you do is water it, and it's not going to do well. The first year, on average, it's probably not going to do well. Think of it, take time to prep your garden before you want it to be a garden, or go ahead and garden anyways. And just accept the slow to no return. Because there's something, when you start moving to organic gardening, it's going to be a learning curve. There's pests, and of course there's something we like to call Mother Nature's tax. Her tax is going to be different depending upon your location and what you're growing. So you start growing your we're going to say tomato plants. You start growing your first set of tomato plants, and you just put them everywhere. Cover your garden in these things. They're not doing very well. They are growing. They're the symbiotic relationships. You can see they're slowly starting to build. The first few weeks, they just were not doing great. Now they're progressively being able to maintain themselves. What can we do to start aiding and fixing our soil food web? Well, the first part, as I had mentioned, is what's called generally bacterial. There's actually about a couple places you can start. I personally, because I have a sandy soil, or if you're going to be working with straight up dirt, as we had mentioned, which is mostly just sand or clay or rock or whatever it is, you don't really have a whole lot of organic material. The organic material will save you. Organic material can be carbon, nitrogen-based things. you can go to a farmer's market and get all of the old fruits and vegetables that are going bad. You can we've added leaf mulch. I prefer a mulch, we'll get to that in a second. And then I also we've used hay, cardboard, newspaper, really just anything that'll slowly break down and create something of a barrier over that top. Um, that is pretty important, and since I actually grow in Texas, that's why we choose the mulch layer, which we'll get into a little bit later. We're going to mostly go for this video. Like I said, it's an introduction. The next one, I'll take some time and go into the actual parts of why I use it for my location. All right, so technically you can go from the plant to start producing nematodes. You can technically go from the plant to start producing fungal, and we chose to go for the organic matter route. After that, there are two ways you can go. There's fungal and there's bacterial. Now, for me personally, we started with fungal or bacterial, and the reason is because I like to start with the smallest, most microscopic thing, and then build off of that. I like to build up all the prey, and then let the predators come in naturally. For me, I didn't have as long of a recovery time. Within 4 to 6 months, I had soil. There were worms, natural earthworms coming up. The turnaround was just better for me, and especially getting started, it didn't cost me a whole lot. So those of you that know, I make my teas in a bucket with a bubbler hooked up to an air stone and some sponge filters and different things to kind of just keep it circulating. Starting out, what I did was every time I would trim my plants, there's technically nutrients in there. Again, we'll get to all this later. So I throw that in, and then to do the bacterial, to feed that bacterial, first of all, I would take some soil somewhere that I liked, go down into a foresty bed where there's lots and just life everywhere. You can hear the birds, and there's grass and bushes and trees and things where life was already good. So I would take a pantyhose, I would put the greens in, and then I would put a couple cups of soil in, and just pour some molasses over the top of that, tie it up and hang it above the water, which is very important. And you can go check out our nutrient making video later on if you're interested in that. So anywho, bubbling something like that, you're going to take basically a bacterial source, and I do long bubbles. So I specifically just drawing out those bacterial. And there's a number of ways you can do it. You could technically get fungal with it as well. I like to do it just for personal use, piece by piece, slowly build it up block by block. It's just me, so I'm not trying to lay a whole layer down by myself because there can be complications with that. So anyways, sugars are known. Technically, I've used white sugar, brown sugar, cane sugar. There's a raw sugar that starts with T, tangerine sugar or tangerine. I don't know. We've used that before. I've used honey, as I said, molasses. I prefer molasses. You can get a whole jar for $3. A jar will last you multiple feedings depending on the size of your garden. I think a jar on average lasted me about 4 feedings, and I was probably going a little too heavy on it. And you've seen the size of our garden. And if you haven't, go ahead and stop. Go hit up that homestead update, and we also have it on a playlist. So anyways, that's going to feed your bacterial. And obviously your bacterial convert basic things. Since I also partake in aquaponics, aquaculture, stuff like that, people like myself understand bacteria in a lot of places is sort of like the backbone to introducing your new thing. Like, for example, in an aquaponic setting, you actually have to wait for, and you don't just build, your system. You actually have to build Mother Nature. One of that's going to be what's called biomedia and filtering. biofiltering, and that's where you take different types of media where these bacteria can live and eat all of the fish urea and poop, so to speak. And well, actually, that's what they do. And there's actually two sets of bacteria, and I may be getting these mixed, but bear with me. So you have your fish urine and stuff come in to this media, and the first bacteria turned it into nitrates or nitrites. It's one of those. And then the second set turned it into the other. So if it's nitrates, it'll turn the next set turns it to nitrites, something like that. Like I said, I'm probably mixing up the nitrates and the nitrites in order, but the concept is there. You know, it takes two sets of bacteria just to make this poop and urine into a nitrogen source that the plants can easily uptake. So my first theory is, if I go throwing a bunch of poop on my garden, what's going to be the absolute first thing to break it down in the fastest way possible? Well, starting out, maybe not permanently, but starting out with an unestablished system, for me, that's going to be the bacteria. So the bacteria are going to be a prey, and they're going to feed a protozoa, a nematode, or an arthropod. There's different ones, so you got to bear with me here. Let me see if I'm saying that. Yeah, arthropod. We always called them anthropods, but so as you can tell, so nematodes are different sizes, because there's believe it or not, there's like 7 or 9 different nematodes that I'm currently aware of. I mean, I don't even know how many there actually are. They're different sizes of arthropods, and of course, there's larger prey. This is the backbone of Mother Nature. So there's a million different versions. So the next thing I would generally start to build on in my garden is fungal, and again I would do that through teas and fungal isolations. I have a good example, so I'm going to pause this real quick and then bring it back to you guys. All right, so I just have a little setup, and this is just like a backyard engineer design. I try not to keep it indoors if I don't have to, just because it's amateur mycology. I am beginning to get into it because of the fungal, just to make things easier, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So I don't know if you can see, but I actually went out in the yard whenever mushrooms were beginning to fruit all over the garden. And I actually picked all the ones that looked similar, and I put them in just coffee grounds. Coffee grounds is a decent way. It's actually really easy to get other things in the soil, but the important part is I'm actually developing a mic block in there off of the original mushrooms. So that'll slowly begin to grow, and I'll monitor its growth. Like I said, I'll monitor its growth until it becomes mostly mycelium dominated. I don't want to go all the way because of possibility of other infections and stuff on that mycelium and that mic block. Mic blocks are basically where fungal has dominated, and mic is mycelium, which is actually the third stage of mushroom or fungal growth. So anywho, I started off with teas. Now I'm upgrading to mic blocks. It doesn't matter how. You can either A, feed what's already in the soil, or B, supplement it. So we are going to be getting into different types of culinary mushrooms and medicinal mushrooms. So as we slowly progress into that region, all of those mic blocks will actually get placed into our soil. So not only will we have natural, we'll also have some artificial fungal. And these fungal are very important. Like I said, they're the next step up from the bacterial. So your fungal are generally only going to feed about 2 things. That's your arthropods and that's your nematodes. So for here, just a quick, because I did say there were different nematodes. This one is actually showing root feeder nematodes, fungal and bacterial feeder nematodes, and also predator nematodes. That's just 3. So actually, if you really start to get into soil food web, as I had mentioned earlier, you can actually put your soil under a microscope and learn to study and determine what kind of soil quality you have and what is actually currently living in your soil. In fact, you can even tell if you have too many salts. It's pretty cool. Um, like I said, there's so many nematodes more than what's being placed and distributed or mentioned here. Um, but you can actually tell by the, I'm going to use this loosely. It's not the correct name, but the idea. The barbs on the front. So the design of the nematode's head and mouth actually can help you determine what nematode it is. Which I just thought that was really cool. It's like a worm. Um, there's like some with like spears, some have like little barbs, some are like they look kind of like I don't remember the name of the whale. They feed on plankton. Um, Anywho, or shark, they feed on plankton. And they just open their mouth and that's it. That's how they feed. There are nematodes similar to that. And of course, there's like I said, there's aquaponics has its own water-based version. So the arthropods are generally going to feed overall. That's like a bigger bug. Oh goodness. Alright, see if we can see that. So those bugs, those orange bug guys there. See, y'all can see our that's our grass, and it goes into the bacterial. Here's our fungal here. You know, bacteria can't. No, that's not our fungal. Whoop. Yep, fungal's up there. Sorry, fungal's up here. Bacteria's here, and as you can see, it feeds different versions, the different nematodes and the arthropods. So arthropods are going to ultimately be the top dog of the soil food web before you start adding things that are outside of the soil. All right? Just because they live in the soil doesn't mean they're in the soil in this circumstance that we're going to be using. So arthropods generally just feed, since they are, this one's called a shredder. So ultimately the arthropod, that shredder is going to be the king of the soil, and the only thing above it is going to be another arthropod. And nematode predators are also going to go to the arthropod predator. So you can see there's like a secondary in command and then the ultimate top dog, the lion of the forest, so to speak. Now that larger arthropod predator is going to start feeding other predators, such as via birds and small animals, your moles, trying to think, maybe armadillos, possibly. I'm not sure what they eat, but generally things that are going to dig through the soil, live most of their life in the soil, are going to eat those arthropods. Obviously, doing the same thing, which we haven't got to, that's just the soil food web. Don't forget, every time they eat something, they poop. You have, feces or fecal matter, so to speak, from so many other areas outside of just horses, cows, dogs, cats, humans, birds. These guys poop too. Like they still have to excrete the things that they don't need from consuming other animals. So basically, just like life, everything runs on a something of a food chain. So anywho, now that y'all are familiar with that, that is all things that can be spawned off of simply bacterial and fungal. Letting that run rampant, it has to be checked. Mother Nature knows what she's doing. And don't forget, just because you destroyed one area doesn't mean the areas outside of it are destroyed. That's where things like agroforestry comes in an attempt to save our planet. In certain desert areas, start growing in there and all that stuff. So anywho, that's mostly going to be the soil food web and how you can kind of look at it and get started. It's just figuring out what you have or learning how to figure out what works for you. A good starting place. We didn't always start with mic blocks. Like I said, sometimes it was tea by simply adding oatmeal, the actual the soil that we add that already contains something, and then add a food source for that thing, and then just spraying it all on the garden. It's a good starting point. And of course, there's a million ways you can spin it, but as long as you're adding a food source and the source that you're trying to amplify, you'll generally turn out okay. So that's going to be it for this video. Sorry guys, it was a little bit long, but we'll see you on the next one. Like I said, we're going to be doing multiple videos today. You have a good one. Peace out there. Be kind, and we'll see you.